Three grown men hit the concrete in 5 seconds flat. A mechanic in oil-stained coveralls stood over
Help
their
me,
crumpled
please,
bodies,
Mom!
knuckles
Jesus
bleeding,
scared
breath
for the
steady.
dog!
Behind him,
Leave me,
a
please!
7-year-old girl screamed over her mother's body. "Help my mom. Please, somebody help my mom." Marcus Kane knelt beside the bleeding woman and froze. He knew that face. Every American knew that face. Victoria Hayes, billionaire CEO of Sterling MedTech Industries. The same woman who destroyed his career, took his pension, called him a liability. 2 years ago she signed the paper that ruined his life. Now her life was in his hands. But Marcus didn't hesitate. Training kicked in before memory could poison the moment. His fingers pressed firmly against the wound at her temple. The blood was steady but not arterial. Scalp laceration, maybe mild concussion. He'd seen worse in Fallujah, seen worse in the factory. "Stay calm. I know how to stop the bleeding. You're going to be okay." The little girl clutched his arm with both hands, face red and streaked with tears. "Is my mommy going to die?" "No, sweetheart. Your mommy's going to be just fine. What's your name?" "Emma." "Okay, Emma. I need you to hold this right here. Can you do that press down just like I'm showing you?" Her small hands trembled but obeyed. "Good girl. That's real brave." Marcus reached into his toolbox, the one he'd dropped 20 feet away, which he'd somehow retrieved without remembering, and pulled out a small first aid kit. Old habit, the kind that gets you fired from corporate jobs but keeps people alive in parking garages. Victoria's eyes fluttered. She looked up at him, confused, fading in and out. Then something passed across her face. Recognition. Marcus felt it too. He knew her. Every line of that face was burned into his memory. Not because he'd loved her, because she'd destroyed him. "You," she whispered, voice barely there. "You still remember how to save people?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "I haven't forgotten anything that could save someone." He kept pressure on the wound. Emma kept holding the gauze where he'd shown her. The ambulance siren was already wailing in the distance. Someone in the garage must have called. When the paramedics arrived, Marcus stepped back. He watched them load Victoria onto the stretcher, watched Emma climb in beside her mother, watched the ambulance doors close. Then he reached into his back pocket and pulled out something he'd carried every day for 2 years. His old Sterling Industries ID badge, Marcus Kane, Safety Director. The photo showed a younger man, cleaner hands, a suit and tie, a title that meant something. He placed it on the stretcher rail where Victoria would find it. Then he picked up his toolbox and walked away into the dark. Harper was waiting when he got home, 8 years old, sitting at the kitchen table with her homework spread out and the old first aid kit he'd given her positioned exactly 2 inches from her right elbow. She always kept it close, like a security blanket, except practical. "You're late, Dad." "Sorry, kiddo. Got held up." She studied his face the way she always did, carefully, seriously, like she was running a diagnostic. "Your hands are shaking." Marcus looked down. She was right. He flexed his fingers and shoved them into his pockets. "Rough day. How was school?" "Fine. Mrs. Patterson said I have to stop correcting her about how to apply a tourniquet. She says 8-year-olds don't need to know that." "Mrs. Patterson's wrong." Harper smiled. Quick, rare a flash that looked exactly like her mother's. Karen had been gone 3 years now. Car accident on the interstate, one icy patch, and Marcus's world split into before and after. He heated up leftover mac and cheese and sat across from his daughter. The apartment was small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that doubled as a dining room. The furniture was worn but clean. Books everywhere, stacked on homemade shelves. No TV in the living room. Just a radio and a map of the United States pinned to the wall with thumbtacks where Harper marked every state she wanted to visit someday. "Dad?" "Yeah." "If I see someone hurt, I should help them, right?" The same question she asked almost every morning. The answer was always the same. A ritual between them. "Yes, you should. But you look around first. Make sure it's safe. Helping people isn't about being a hero. It's about not leaving anyone behind." Harper nodded, satisfied, then went back to her math homework. Marcus stared at his hands, the burn scars, the grease under his fingernails, the blood he hadn't quite washed off from Victoria Hayes's forehead. He thought about the 3 men in the garage. Professionals, not muggers. Muggers take your purse and run. These men had delivered a beating, a message. He thought about Victoria's face, the confusion in her eyes when she recognized him. He thought about the last time he'd seen her, 2 years ago. The worst day of his life, or so he'd believed until Karen died. The explosion had come at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Marcus remembered the exact time because he'd just checked his watch thinking about picking up Harper from daycare. The east wing of Sterling Industries' Texas manufacturing plant blew outward like a grenade. Alarms shrieked. Smoke poured through the corridors. Marcus was already running before the debris settled. 8 years as a Navy SEAL teaches you that. You run toward the thing everyone else runs from. Protocol was clear, crystal clear. He'd written half of it himself. In the event of an explosion in the manufacturing wing, priority 1 was securing the prototype equipment, millions in proprietary technology, the company's future product line. But Marcus heard screams. A man's voice, high with panic and pain, coming from under the collapsed shelving unit where the flames were already licking. Ryan Brooks, 26 years old, 2 kids, wife expecting a third. Marcus's division head, a man named Patterson, grabbed his arm. "Morrison, secure the prototypes. That's a direct order. We'll come back for him. He'll be dead by then. That equipment is worth $7 million. Marcus looked Patterson in the eye. "And Ryan's worth more." He pulled free and ran toward the fire. The heat was ungodly. The shelving unit had collapsed diagonally, pinning Ryan's legs. The kid was screaming, trying to drag himself free, his uniform already smoldering. Marcus grabbed the metal frame and heaved. His gloves melted into his skin. He could smell his own flesh burning. He didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Because Ryan Brooks was 26 years old with 2 kids and a wife expecting a third, and no piece of equipment on earth was worth more than that. He dragged Ryan out, carried him on his back through the smoke and the heat and the chaos, set him down outside where the paramedics were staging. Then he went back in, not for the prototypes, but to make sure nobody else was trapped. The prototypes burned. $7 million. 3 months of research data gone. Ryan Brooks lived. His legs healed. He went home to his wife and his kids. The termination letter arrived on Marcus's desk the next morning. Victoria Hayes's signature at the bottom, sharp and precise, her words typed in corporate language that somehow managed to be both impersonal and devastating. "Mr. Kane, your actions during the incident on March 14th, while personally motivated, constituted a direct violation of established safety protocols. The resulting loss of proprietary equipment totaling $7.2 million cannot be overlooked. Effective immediately, your position as Director of Safety is terminated." Below the formal language, she had added a handwritten note. Just 1 line. "Safety is about protocols, not personal heroics. We can't retain employees who can't follow the rules." Marcus had stood in her office doorway. She wouldn't look up from her desk. "Those protocols were wrong," he said. "A man would have died. A man violated safety procedures and caused an explosion. You compounded the damage by prioritizing 1 employee over millions in company assets. Ryan didn't cause that explosion. The safety systems were down for maintenance that should have required a full evacuation." Victoria's pen stopped moving for a moment. Just a moment. Something flickered across her face. Then it was gone. "The investigation is complete, Mr. Kane. The report is clear. The report is a lie." "That's enough." Her voice went cold, corporate cold, the kind of cold that builds empires and destroys people. "Security will escort you out." Marcus nodded once. Then he said the words that would echo between them for 2 years. "Safety is about people, not paperwork. Someday you'll understand that." He walked out of Sterling Industries with a box of personal belongings and burn scars that would never fully heal. His pension was gone. His references were poison. No company in the industry would touch a safety director who'd been fired for protocol violations at Sterling Industries. He applied to 47 jobs in the first 3 months. 47 rejections. The termination followed him like a criminal record. Eventually, he found work at Riverside Auto Repair in a neighborhood where nobody asked about your resume and nobody cared about your past. The pay was a fraction of what he'd earned. The work was honest. It kept the lights on and food on the table. Barely. Some nights after Harper was asleep, Marcus sat at the kitchen table and stared at his hands, the scars from the fire, the grease from the engines, and wondered if he'd made the right choice. Then he'd remember Ryan Brooks going home to his kids, and the question answered itself. Victoria Hayes had not thought about Marcus Kane in 2 years. Not once. That was a lie she told herself so effectively that she almost believed it. The truth was more complicated. She thought about him every time she signed off on a safety report, every time the name Texas Plant appeared in a quarterly review, every time she saw the number $7.2 million in a financial statement. She thought about him, and she pushed the thought away with practiced efficiency, the way she pushed away everything that threatened the carefully constructed architecture of her certainty. After her husband Michael died heart attack on the freeway, dead before the car stopped rolling, Victoria had rebuilt herself into someone who couldn't be hurt, not by loss, not by loneliness, not by the growing distance between herself and Emma, who spent more hours with nannies than with her mother. Better to be feared than underestimated, she told a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Better to be respected than liked, she said at a shareholder meeting. What she never said to anyone was that she went home every night to a penthouse that echoed with emptiness, that the only photograph she kept was of herself and Emma, and that Emma's smile in the picture looked less real every year, that she sometimes sat in the dark and wondered what she was building all of this for. But those thoughts were weakness, and Victoria Hayes did not permit herself weakness until 3 men beat her unconscious in a parking garage, and the man she'd thrown away like garbage was the one who saved her life. She woke up in the hospital at 3 a.m. with Emma asleep in the chair beside her bed and a worn Sterling Industries ID badge on the table. Marcus Kane, safety director. The photo was faded. The edges were bent. There was blood on it. Her blood. She held it under the dim hospital light and something cracked inside her chest. Not broken. Cracked the way a dam cracks before it gives way. "Mommy." Emma stirred, rubbing her eyes. "The doctor said you have a something. Concussion. I'm okay, sweetheart." "That man who saved you, he used to work for you." "Yes. A long time ago." Emma's eyes, Michael's eyes, dark and serious and too perceptive for a 7-year-old, locked onto hers. Then why did he help? Victoria had no answer. She lay there in the hospital dark, holding a dead man's badge, while her daughter's question hung in the air like smoke. Why did he help the woman who took his career, his income, his dignity? The woman who called his act of heroism a protocol violation and had security escort him from the building. Why did he help? "Because once I failed when I couldn't help someone in time." That's what he'd said in the ambulance. She'd heard it through the fog of pain and confusion. But that wasn't the whole truth. And somewhere deep in the part of herself she'd spent years walling off, Victoria knew it. He helped because that's who he was. Not who his job title said he was. Not who his bank account said he was. Not who the corporate world that had chewed him up and spit him out said he was. He was the man who ran toward fire when everyone else ran away. And she was the woman who punished him for it. Victoria turned the badge over in her hands. The dried blood flaked onto the hospital sheets. She traced her finger over his name and felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Shame. Not the corporate kind, the kind you manage with PR statements and legal settlements. Real shame. The kind that settles in your stomach like a stone and won't move no matter how many times you tell yourself you were just following protocol. She closed her eyes, but sleep wouldn't come, because Emma's question kept repeating over and over in a loop she couldn't break. Why did he help? And underneath it, another question. Quieter. More dangerous. What kind of person fires a man for saving a life? 3 days later, Victoria drove across town to a neighborhood she'd never visited. No driver, no security detail, no executive armor. Just jeans, a plain blouse and sunglasses to hide the bruise still yellowing across her temple. She parked across the street from Riverside Auto Repair and sat in her car for 20 minutes watching. Marcus was on his knees beside an old Chevy pickup, arms deep in the engine compartment. Beside him, perched on a wooden stool, sat a little girl with serious brown eyes and a first aid kit tucked under one arm. She was asking him questions about the engine, about the tools, about why the radiator hose connected where it did. And Marcus answered everyone with the same patient attention he'd give to a fellow engineer. Victoria watched their rhythm, the way Harper handed him tools before he asked, the way Marcus paused his work to explain something she didn't understand, the way they existed together in comfortable silence that spoke of absolute trust. Something tightened in her chest. She'd built a billion-dollar company. She sat in boardrooms with senators and tech moguls. She controlled the livelihoods of 12,000 employees, and she had never once had what this man had with his daughter in a run-down garage on the wrong side of town. Victoria got out of the car and walked across the street. Her heels clicked on the asphalt. Wrong shoes for this neighborhood. Wrong shoes for this moment. Marcus looked up. Oil on his forearms, sweat on his forehead. His expression didn't change. No surprise, no anger, nothing she could read. "I came to thank you." Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Marcus wiped his hands on a rag, slowly taking his time. "Thanks won't make wounds heal faster." "I know, but I owed you that much, more than that." "You don't owe me anything, Ms. Hayes. I didn't do it for you. I did it because a little girl was screaming for her mother." The words landed like a slap. Not cruel, just honest. Honest in a way that Victoria's world rarely was. "Why did you help me after everything I did to you? Why?" Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then he said something she didn't expect. "Because once I failed, when I couldn't help someone in time." Harper looked up from her stool, voice, quiet, careful, the way children speak when they sense adult pain in the room. "Dad, is that person okay now?" Marcus glanced at Victoria. Something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the raw edge of something that might eventually get there. "Now they are," he said. Victoria stood in the garage, surrounded by engine parts and the smell of motor oil, and felt the last piece of her old self crack open. She didn't know what would grow in its place. Harper slid off her stool and walked over to Victoria. She looked up with those serious brown eyes and held out her first aid kit. "Do you want a Band-Aid? Dad says Band-Aids don't fix everything, but they make you feel like somebody cares." Victoria knelt down. Her eyes burned. She took the Band-Aid from Harper's small hand and pressed it carefully over the cut on her own palm that she hadn't even noticed. "Thank you, Harper." "You're welcome. Dad helps everybody, even people who don't say thank you." Marcus said nothing, but when Victoria looked up at him, she saw something in his face she hadn't expected. Not anger, not resentment, sadness. The kind of sadness that comes from a man who knows exactly what the world costs and pays it anyway every single day without complaint. Victoria stood. She didn't trust her voice, so she just nodded once and walked back to her car. She sat behind the wheel for a long time, staring at the Band-Aid on her palm, before she finally turned the key and drove away. She didn't know she'd be back tomorrow. Victoria came back the next morning. She told herself it was about the attack, about finding answers, about understanding why 3 professionals had beaten her in a parking garage. She told herself it had nothing to do with the Band-Aid still stuck to her palm or the way Marcus Kane's daughter had looked at her with those serious brown eyes. She brought coffee and pastries from a bakery downtown, the kind of place that charged $9 for a croissant. She realized how ridiculous that was only when she set the bag on Marcus's workbench next to a half-eaten gas station sandwich and a thermos of black coffee that probably cost $1.50. Marcus slid out from under a Mustang, saw her, and paused. Surprise crossed his face, brief, barely there, before his expression went neutral again. He stood, wiped his hands on a rag, and looked at the fancy bakery bag like it was a puzzle he hadn't asked to solve. "I looked into your file," Victoria said. No preamble, no small talk. She'd been rehearsing this in the car and decided the only way through was straight. The accident that got you fired. You saved someone's life that day and broke company protocol doing it. The protocol was wrong. Marcus tossed the rag onto the workbench. His voice was flat, not hostile, but not warm either. You signed the termination paper yourself. I know. Her voice cracked. She hadn't expected that. Victoria Hayes didn't crack. I know I did. Harper appeared from around the corner, face lighting up when she saw Victoria. Dad, is this the brave lady you saved? Victoria knelt down to Harper's level, wincing from the soreness still running through her ribs. Your dad's the brave one, sweetie. I know. Harper beamed like this was the most obvious fact in the world. He saves everybody. He was a soldier before and he showed me how to make bandages and stop bleeding and everything. Victoria looked up at Marcus. He shrugged. She asks a lot of questions. Better to teach her than have her learn the wrong way. She's what, 7? 8, Marcus corrected. Old enough to know how to help if she needs to. Victoria stood, and for a moment the two of them just looked at each other. 2 years of silence and resentment and unanswered questions sitting between them like a wall. Then Victoria lowered her voice. The men who attacked me. I think it might be connected to something at work. Marcus's expression shifted. The mechanic disappeared. Something harder moved behind his eyes. What kind of something? I've found documents about safety violations at our Texas facility, serious ones that were covered up. I was looking into them when the attack happened. You were looking into the Texas plant, Marcus repeated slowly. And then you got jumped in a parking garage. Yes. Convenient timing. That's what I thought. Victoria glanced toward the girls. Harper had gone back to her stool coloring. Then she turned back to Marcus. I need to know what really happened 2 years ago. The real story. Not what's in the official report. Why ask me? You made it clear my perspective wasn't valuable. The words hit Victoria square in the chest. She deserved them. She knew she deserved them. But she pressed forward anyway, because she didn't have the luxury of pride anymore. Because I think I made a mistake, and I think there might be more mistakes I don't even know about. Marcus studied her face for a long time, reading her, deciding if she was worth the risk. Victoria held his gaze and didn't flinch, though every instinct told her to look away. Before he could answer, tires screamed on the street outside. Marcus's body reacted before his mind did. He shoved Victoria sideways with one arm and lunged for Harper with the other. A dark sedan shot through the open garage door at full speed, clipping the Mustang and sending a shower of tools and engine parts across the concrete. Marcus rolled with Harper behind a heavy steel tool cabinet. His body curled around her like a shield. Victoria hit the floor and covered her head as metal fragments ricocheted off every surface. The car reversed. Tires shrieked, and then it was gone. Silence. Dust settling, the tick of hot metal cooling. You okay? Marcus's voice. Calm, impossibly calm. Victoria nodded from the floor, too shocked to speak. Harper was pressed against Marcus's chest, pale but not crying. Dad, Harper said quietly. That wasn't an accident, was it? No, sweetheart, it wasn't. Victoria spotted a piece of paper on the ground near the garage entrance, weighed down by a spark plug. She picked it up. Her hands were trembling. The words were typed clean, impersonal. Stop investigating or next time there won't be a warning. Police came 20 minutes later, took statements, looked bored. Probably teenagers, ma'am. We'll file a report. After they left, Marcus was already cleaning up the wreckage, jaw set tight. Victoria watched him right, a fallen toolbox sweep glass from the floor, move with the controlled fury of a man who had learned long ago that anger was only useful when channeled. Those men in the parking garage, she said. This car. Someone is sending me a message. Seems like you kicked a hornet's nest. Marcus sat down the broom and faced her. What exactly did you find? Victoria hesitated. She was standing at the edge of something she couldn't undo. Once she told him there was no going back to the comfortable lie that her company was what she'd believed it to be. The official report blamed the technician you saved, Ryan Brooks, said he violated safety protocols and caused the fire. She paused. But I found emails suggesting the safety systems had been deactivated for maintenance that day. Maintenance that should have required evacuating that entire section. Who authorized that? Robert Whitmore, Vice President of Operations, your direct superior at the time. Marcus went very still. And the person who recommended my termination most strongly. The same person who just became acting head of safety last month. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The implications filled the silence like smoke. Whitmore set up Ryan, Marcus said. Not a question. Blamed him for an explosion caused by his own shortcuts. And when I went off script to save Ryan's life, I became the next convenient problem to eliminate. Yes. And you believed him. Victoria's throat tightened. I trusted him, Marcus. He was my mentor. He brought me into the company. I believed what he told me about you without question, and I signed that paper. And I didn't even have the decency to look you in the eye. Marcus's face didn't soften, but something in his posture shifted. The rigid wall of resentment loosened just slightly like a fist that had been clenched too long. What happens now? He asked. I take what I found to the board, show them the pattern, force an investigation. And if Whitmore finds out before you get there? Victoria looked at the threatening note still in her hand. I think he already knows. That evening, after the girls were asleep, Emma picked up from school. Harper tucked in by Marcus. The two of them sat at Marcus's kitchen table and spread out every document Victoria had gathered. Internal emails, inspection logs, maintenance schedules that didn't match the official timeline. It was damning but incomplete. A puzzle with too many missing pieces. We need more, Marcus said, flipping through a stack of falsified inspection reports. This suggests something's wrong, but it won't hold up. Whitmore's got lawyers who eat circumstantial evidence for breakfast. I know. Victoria rubbed her eyes. She looked exhausted, different from the polished executive he remembered. Smaller somehow, but also more real. I need to get into his files, his computer. There has to be a trail. You're talking about breaking into an executive's office at your own company. I'm talking about finding the truth before he buries it so deep no one ever digs it out. Marcus leaned back in his chair and looked at her. Really looked at her. 2 years ago she told him safety was about protocols. Now she wanted to break every protocol in the book. 2 years ago you told me safety was about protocols. Now you want to break every protocol in the book. 2 years ago I was wrong. The admission cost her something visible. A tightening around her mouth, a flicker of pain in her eyes. I was wrong about the protocols. I was wrong about you. And I think I was wrong about a lot of other things I haven't even discovered yet. Marcus didn't respond right away. He got up, poured 2 cups of coffee, set one in front of her. Then he sat back down. I still have contacts in the security department. People who know what Whitmore is really like. The next night they went in. Marcus's contact had arranged a 20-minute window camera maintenance on the executive corridor. They entered through the service entrance, moved through back hallways, avoided the main lobby. Victoria's heart hammered so loudly she was sure the night guard could hear it from 3 floors away. Whitmore's office door was locked. Marcus produced a small tool from his jacket and had it open in seconds. "Where did you learn that?" Victoria whispered. "You pick up skills in special operations. Not all doors in war zones come with key cards." The computer was password protected. "Try Denali 7-4, Marcus said. Victoria typed it in. The desktop loaded. She stared at him. "How did you know that?" "He climbs Denali on vacation every July, brags about it constantly. People who brag rarely think about security." They had 15 minutes. Victoria searched his emails while Marcus went through file cabinets. The emails were careful. Whitmore was too smart to write anything explicitly incriminating, but there were patterns, references to special handling for safety incidents, discussions about containment strategies for worker complaints, code words that Victoria now recognized as corporate camouflage for cover-ups. Then she found it, a folder labeled Insurance Policies. Inside were files on dozens of employees, detailed personal information, financial records, family situations, pressure points, leverage. Ryan Brooks had a file, his NDA, a side letter specifying that his settlement was contingent on testifying against Marcus. Marcus had a file, every piece of dirt Whitmore could find, every vulnerability cataloged with clinical precision. "Marcus, look at this." Victoria turned the monitor. "He's been collecting blackmail material on employees, using it to keep people quiet for years." Marcus's expression darkened as he scanned the screen. "There's a file on you, too." Victoria clicked on it and felt her stomach drop. Surveillance photos of her and Emma, records of her finances, transcripts of private conversations with board members. Whitmore had been building a case against her for months, waiting for the right moment to strike. "He planned all of this," she breathed. "The attack, the threats. He was already prepared to destroy me the moment I started asking questions. And there's more." Marcus held up a folder from the cabinet. Falsified safety inspections, 5 different facilities, all signed off by Whitmore personally. They photographed everything, worked fast, methodical. Then Marcus froze, hand raised for silence. Footsteps in the hallway. A flashlight beam swept under the door. They crouched behind Whitmore's desk, pressed together in the dark, breathing shallow, until the security guard moved on. "We need to go," Marcus whispered. "Now." They retraced their steps and made it back to Marcus's truck without incident. Victoria leaned against the headrest, shaking with adrenaline and something she hadn't felt in years. The rush of doing something that mattered, something that carried real stakes beyond quarterly earnings. "I can't believe we just did that," she said. "I've never broken a rule in my life." "Welcome to the other side of the rules, Victoria." Marcus started the engine. "Sometimes it's the only place truth lives." The next morning, Victoria walked into the Sterling MedTech boardroom with the evidence organized on her laptop and a calm she didn't entirely feel. She'd barely sat down when her assistant Ethan hurried over. "Ms. Hayes, Mr. Whitmore called an emergency board meeting at 10. He says it's about unauthorized access to confidential files." Victoria's stomach tightened. Someone had tipped him off. Maybe Ethan himself. Maybe the file access logs. It didn't matter now. The confrontation she'd been bracing for was here. The boardroom was full. 12 board members. Robert Whitmore standing at the head of the table, remote in hand. A security camera image projected behind him. Victoria handing documents to Ethan in the parking lot. "Victoria," Whitmore said smoothly, "we were just discussing a concerning security breach. These confidential company documents appear to be finding their way into unauthorized hands." "I authorized that access as part of an internal review," Victoria said, taking her seat. "As CEO, I have that authority." "An internal review that bypassed both the safety department and legal." Whitmore smiled thinly. "That's highly irregular." Janet Summers, one of the senior board members, leaned forward. "What exactly are you investigating, Victoria?" Before Victoria could answer, Whitmore cut in. "She's sharing sensitive company information with Marcus Kane, a former employee who was terminated 2 years ago for violating safety protocols, a man with an obvious grudge against this company." Victoria kept her voice level. "I'm investigating a pattern of safety violations and subsequent cover-ups at multiple Sterling Industries facilities. Violations that put our workers at risk and our company in legal jeopardy." "And what does this have to do with Marcus Kane?" asked another board member. "Mr. Kane was wrongfully terminated. He was made a scapegoat for decisions made by others, specifically decisions to bypass safety systems during a plant upgrade." Whitmore's smile didn't waver, but something behind his eyes shifted. "That's a serious accusation, Victoria. One I hope you can substantiate." "I can. Would you like to see the emails ordering maintenance staff to bypass safety interlocks, or the falsified inspection reports submitted after the fact?" The room went dead silent. Whitmore and Victoria locked eyes across the length of the table, two people who had once trusted each other completely, now on opposite sides of a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Janet Summers broke the silence. "I think we should continue this in executive session. Charles Robert, Victoria, please give us the room." In the hallway, Whitmore cornered Victoria by the water cooler. The polished executive was gone. What remained was something harder and more dangerous. "You're making a serious mistake," he hissed. "You have no idea what you're meddling with." "I know exactly what I'm doing, cleaning up my company." "Your company?" His voice dropped to a whisper. "Don't forget who brought you in, who mentored you, who made you. You didn't make me, Robert. You used me. There's a difference." Victoria stepped closer. "And if anything happens to me anymore, accidents, everything I found goes public instantly." Something flickered in Whitmore's eyes. Not fear exactly, recognition. The recognition of a man who had underestimated someone and was only now realizing the cost. When they were called back into the boardroom 30 minutes later, the verdict was split down the middle. Janet Summers delivered it carefully. "The board has decided to place both of you on administrative leave pending an independent investigation. Neither of you will have access to company systems or facilities." By that evening, Victoria's corporate credit cards were frozen. Security had escorted her from the building with a single box of personal belongings. Her company-owned apartment, part of her compensation package, would be terminated within 48 hours. The news hit at 9 p.m. Victoria's face filled the screen. Sterling Medtech CEO suspended amid allegations of corporate espionage. Emma looked up from her homework. "Mommy, are they talking about us?" Victoria turned off the TV. Her hands were steady, but her mind was spinning. Most of her liquid assets were tied to company stock she couldn't currently access. Her bank accounts were frozen pending the investigation. Her friends, all business associates, had already started distancing themselves. One by one, the texts stopped coming. The calls went to voicemail. She sat on the couch in her soon-to-be former apartment and scrolled through her contacts. 200 names. Not one she could call. Her phone rang. "Marcus. I saw the news. You okay? They've locked me out of everything. Frozen my accounts. We have 48 hours to vacate the apartment. Do you have somewhere to go?" Victoria closed her eyes. The most powerful woman in Silicon Valley, and she had nowhere to go. The irony was so sharp it almost drew blood. "I'm working on it." A pause on the line. Then Marcus's voice, quieter now. "I have a pull-out couch. It's not fancy, but it's clean. Harper would be thrilled to have Emma around." "Marcus, I couldn't. It's not imposing if it's offered freely." Another pause. "You helped me see the truth, Victoria. Let me help you stay safe while you fight for it." The next morning, Victoria and Emma arrived at Marcus's apartment with 2 suitcases and a box of essentials. Emma ran immediately to find Harper. Victoria stood in the small living room clutching her bag strap, feeling like a stranger in her own skin. Marcus handed her a mug of coffee. The handle was chipped. The coffee was strong. "Having the CEO of Sterling Medtech sleeping on my pull-out couch wasn't exactly on my 5-year plan," he said. "Former CEO, apparently." Victoria took a sip. "The news is reporting that Whitmore has been named interim chief executive." They stood in the small kitchen drinking coffee, listening to the sound of 2 little girls laughing in the next room. Victoria looked around at the modest apartment, the cinder-block bookshelves, the hand-me-down furniture, the crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator, and felt something she hadn't expected. Not pity, not discomfort. Envy. "I spent my whole life building that company," she said quietly, "and it all disappeared in a day." Marcus glanced toward the bedroom where the girls were playing. "Not everything. You still have what matters most." Victoria followed his gaze. Through the half-open door she could see Emma showing Harper something on her tablet. Both girls cross-legged on the bed, their heads bent together like they'd known each other their whole lives. "And your integrity," Marcus added. "That's worth more than any stock price." Victoria looked down at the chipped mug in her hands. The CEO who had controlled a billion-dollar empire, now drinking borrowed coffee in a mechanic's apartment, dependent on the kindness of the man she had wronged most deeply. She should have felt humiliated. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. That feeling didn't last. 3 days into living at Marcus's apartment, Victoria woke at 2 in the morning to find a message from Janet Summers. Just one line. "Be careful, Victoria. This goes deeper than you know. Watch your back." She stared at the phone in the dark, the pull-out couch springs digging into her back, and listened to the sound of the girls breathing in Harper's room. Emma had stopped asking when they were going home. She'd stopped asking about the apartment, about her toys, about the nanny. She'd adapted the way children do when the adults around them are too afraid to explain what's happening. Victoria heard footsteps. Marcus appeared from his bedroom wearing sweatpants and a faded navy t-shirt, moving quietly enough that she almost didn't notice. "Can't sleep. Janet Summers just warned me to watch my back." "Smart woman." He sat in the armchair across from her. "Whitmore isn't going to stop at character assassination, you know that." "I never thought he'd go this far. I trusted him, Marcus, for 10 years. Trust is easy to give. It's knowing when to take it back that's hard." Victoria pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "I've spent years thinking I was building something important. Running a company, making decisions, managing 12,000 people. Now I'm sleeping on a pull-out couch and I can't even buy Emma a new pair of shoes without checking my savings balance." "Don't romanticize struggle," Marcus said quietly. "It's been hard, really hard. After Karen died, I was lost for a long time, taking care of Harper, trying to find work with a termination on my record. Some days I barely held it together. How did you?" "One day at a time. Focus on what matters. Harper needed me. Teaching her, protecting her. The rest is just noise." His eyes found hers in the dim light. "You'll find your way through this too." Victoria wanted to believe him. But at 2 in the morning, in a borrowed apartment with her career in ruins and a dangerous man circling closer, belief felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. The next morning, while Marcus was at the garage and the girls were at school, Victoria used the quiet to work. She needed evidence that couldn't be buried. Something beyond the files they'd photographed in Whitmore's office. She needed witnesses. She tracked down Ryan Brooks through social media. He was working for a competitor in Austin now, rebuilding his life. She sent him a careful email explaining the situation, asking for his account of what really happened during the explosion. His response came within the hour. 5 words that hit her like a closed fist. "I can't help you. NDA." Victoria stared at the screen. Of course. Whitmore had bought Ryan's silence. Paid him off, locked him down, made sure the one person who could corroborate Marcus's story was legally bound to say nothing. The question was how many others had been silenced the same way. A knock at the apartment door shattered her concentration. Victoria checked the peephole. 2 men in suits. Not the ones from the parking garage, but cut from the same cloth. Corporate security or private investigators, the kind of men companies hire when they want problems to go away quietly. "Ms. Hayes, we know you're in there. We just want to talk about your situation." Victoria didn't move, didn't breathe. She pressed her back against the wall beside the door and waited. After several minutes of knocking and calling, they left. She texted Marcus immediately. "People came looking for me. Corporate types. They're gone, but they know I'm here." His reply was instant. "Don't open the door for anyone. I'm coming home." 20 minutes later, Marcus came through the door, checking the hallway and stairwell before locking up behind him. "They know where you are. That's not good." "How would they track me here?" "Your phone, your car, Ethan knowing we were in contact. Doesn't matter now. What matters is they'll be back, and next time they might not knock." Victoria watched him pace the small living room. The gentle father she'd seen with Harper was gone. In his place was someone harder, sharper, the Navy SEAL, assessing threats and calculating responses. "We need to get ahead of this," Marcus said. "Whitmore is systematically destroying your reputation and cutting off your resources. If we don't move first, you could face criminal charges or worse." "What are you thinking? We take everything we have, the photos, the documents, your testimony, to someone Whitmore doesn't control, not the board. Half of them are compromised. You saw the blackmail files." "Then who?" "OSHA, federal investigators, and the press." Marcus stopped pacing and faced her. "Once this goes public, Whitmore loses his leverage. Right now he's fighting in the dark using threats and intimidation because nobody's watching. We turn on the lights and he's got nowhere to hide." Victoria nodded slowly. He was right. She knew he was right. But something else was pressing at the edges of her mind. A growing suspicion that the safety violations and cover-ups they'd already uncovered were only part of the story. That Whitmore was protecting something bigger, something worth killing for. "There's something else," she said. "Something we're missing." The way he reacted in that hallway, the look in his eyes when I told him everything would go public. That wasn't a man worried about safety fines or bad press. That was fear. Real fear. Fear of what? I don't know yet, but whatever it is, it's the reason he won't stop coming after us. They spent the rest of that afternoon organizing everything they had. Marcus laid it out on the kitchen table with military precision timeline of events, chain of evidence list of potential witnesses. Victoria drafted a statement detailing her own role in the culture that had enabled the violations, her failure to question what she was told, her commitment to making it right. Marcus watched her write it. "You're including your own complicity. If I don't, it's just finger-pointing. The truth includes my part in it. That takes guts. It takes honesty, something I should have practiced a long time ago." Their work was cut short by Marcus's phone, Harper's school. The caller ID alone sent his hand rigid around the phone. "Mr. Kane, this is Principal Davis. There was an incident at pickup. A man tried to collect Harper claiming to be her uncle. When we asked for verification, he left quickly." Marcus's face went white. "Is Harper safe?" "Yes, she's here with us, but I wanted to alert you immediately. I'm on my way. Do not release her to anyone but me. No one." He hung up and turned to Victoria. His voice was calm, terrifyingly calm, the kind of calm that comes right before a detonation. "Someone tried to take Harper from school." Victoria was already on her feet. "Emma! Where's Emma?" Marcus called Emma's school. The answer turned his blood to ice. Emma had been signed out 40 minutes ago by a woman claiming to be Victoria's assistant. She had proper identification. She knew the security password. Victoria grabbed the edge of the kitchen table. The room tilted. "No, no, 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 no. We need to move. Now." They raced to Harper's school first. Marcus collected his daughter, holding her so tight she squeaked. Then they drove to Emma's school where police were already taking statements. The security cameras showed a well-dressed woman leading Emma by the hand to a waiting SUV. Emma wasn't struggling. She thought she was being picked up by someone her mother trusted. Victoria gave the police every detail she could, but her voice kept breaking. The detective was patient, professional, taking notes and asking questions. Marcus paced behind them, his body coiled with a fury so controlled it was almost invisible. Almost. Then Victoria's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered with shaking hands. "Ms. Hayes?" A familiar voice. Smooth, confident, enjoying this. "You seem to have misplaced something valuable, as have I." "Robert." Victoria's voice shook with rage and terror. "Where is my daughter?" "Safe, for now. But that could change if certain files don't return to where they belong. All copies. All evidence." Marcus moved to Victoria's side close enough to hear. She put it on speaker. "If you've touched her..." Marcus began, his voice so quiet it barely registered as sound. "Mr. Kane, always the hero." Whitmore sounded unsurprised. "But heroics won't help this time. This is business." "Taking a child is not business," Victoria snapped. "It's a federal crime. So is corporate espionage, industrial sabotage, breaking and entering." Whitmore paused to let each word land. "The warehouse on Canton Street. 1 hour. Come alone. Bring everything you took, and the child goes home unharmed." The line went dead. Victoria looked at Marcus. Every color had drained from her face, but her jaw was set hard. The CEO was back. Not the corporate version, but something raw. A mother with nothing left to lose. "We have to go," she said. "It's a trap." Marcus's voice was flat, certain. "He doesn't intend to let any of us walk away from this." The detective stepped forward. "We can send officers..." "No." Marcus cut him off. "If Whitmore sees police, we don't know what happens to Emma." He turned to Victoria. "I need to make a call. Someone I trust." He stepped away and spoke into his phone for less than 2 minutes. When he came back, his expression had changed. The fear was still there, buried deep, controlled, but layered over. It was something Victoria recognized. Purpose. The look of a man with a plan. "Cole," Marcus said. "My former SEAL teammate. FBI now. Corporate Crime Division. He's been building a file on Whitmore for months. I just gave him the last pieces he needed. Will he help? He's already mobilizing a team, but we need to give them time to get into position, which means someone has to walk into that warehouse and keep Whitmore talking." Victoria understood immediately. Me. Victoria. He expects me. He wants to see me submit. That's what this is about for him. Not just the files, but proving he still controls me. I walk in, I play his game, I keep him talking while your people get into position. Marcus stared at her. 2 years ago he'd stood in her office and she'd refused to meet his eyes. Now she was volunteering to walk into a trap set by a man who had already tried to kill them both. "You're sure about this?" "He has my daughter Marcus. I'd walk into hell." Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pendant on a chain. "Wear this. Tracking device and microphone. Cole's team will hear everything. When we're ready, it'll beep once. That's the signal." Victoria took it. Her hands had stopped shaking. Fear was still there, but it had been replaced by something stronger. The same thing she'd seen in Marcus's eyes 2 years ago when he ran toward the fire instead of away from it. They left Harper with the mother of one of her school friends, a police officer's wife, the safest option they could arrange on short notice. Harper held on to Marcus's hand at the door, her face serious and pale. "Dad, you're going to get Emma back, right?" Marcus knelt down eye to eye. "Yes. I promise, kiddo. I'll bring her home." Harper reached into her pocket and pulled out a Band-Aid. She pressed it into his palm. "For when you get hurt. Because you always get hurt when you help people." Marcus's throat tightened. He kissed her forehead, slipped the Band-Aid into his pocket and walked to the truck without looking back. If he looked back, he might not leave. The warehouse on Canton Street sat in an industrial district that emptied after dark. Victoria parked where instructed and walked toward the side entrance alone. The pendant hung against her collarbone, warm from her skin. In her hand she carried a USB drive containing copies of the evidence. Inside the space was massive. Shipping containers arranged like a maze. Low lighting. The kind of place where a person could disappear and no one would hear them scream. Whitmore stood in a clearing at the center, flanked by 2 men. The same 2 who had come to Marcus's apartment. Professional, armed, patient. No sign of Emma. "Where is she?" Victoria demanded, stopping 10 feet away. Whitmore smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Show me what you brought." Victoria held up the USB drive. "Everything we took from your office. Every document, every photo. Now where is my daughter?" Whitmore gestured to one of his men who disappeared behind a container and returned with Emma. The little girl looked scared but unhurt, clutching a stuffed rabbit that wasn't hers. When she saw Victoria, her face crumpled. "Mommy, it's okay, baby. I'm right here. Everything's going to be fine." Whitmore extended his hand. "The drive." Victoria stepped forward slowly. "How do I know you won't hurt us once I hand this over?" "You don't, but you have no choice." Whitmore's smile widened. "Your maternal instinct overrides your business sense. It always was your weakness." "Caring about my child isn't weakness, Robert." "It is when it makes you predictable." Victoria stopped just within arm's reach. The USB drive extended. She needed more time. Cole's team wasn't in position yet. "Why?" she asked, and the genuine pain in her voice wasn't acting. "We built the company together. 10 years. Why risk everything like this?" Whitmore's expression shifted. The mask slipped just for a moment, revealing the bitter, resentful man beneath the polished exterior. "Because you started believing your own press, Victoria, thinking you built Sterling Industries. I was the one who made the hard decisions. I kept the machine running while you played CEO, gave interviews, collected awards. I earned this company. You were just the acceptable face we put on it." So you cut corners, let people get hurt, covered it up. I did what was necessary. The same thing every successful company does. The difference is, I was honest about the cost. 17 people died, Robert. Something flickered across his face, not guilt. Something colder. Calculation. Collateral damage. Every industry has it. Children lost parents. Families destroyed. And you buried it. I managed it. The way I've managed everything. The way I'll manage this. His fingers closed around the USB drive. In that same moment, the pendant at Victoria's throat emitted a single sharp beep. Whitmore froze. What? The warehouse doors exploded inward. Men in tactical gear poured through every entrance, weapons raised, flashlights cutting through the dim space. Down, down, everyone on the ground. Whitmore's men reached for their weapons. They were on the floor before their hands touched the holsters. Whitmore lunged for Victoria, instinct rage, desperation, and grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise. Then he staggered backward, his face contorting in shock. Behind him stood Marcus, appearing from the shadows like something summoned from the dark. One precise strike to the pressure point in Whitmore's shoulder. Whitmore's arm went dead. He dropped to his knees, gasping. "Emma!" Victoria shouted, spinning toward where her daughter had been standing. "Here!" Marcus's voice from behind a shipping container. He stepped out with Emma clinging to his neck, her face buried in his shoulder. His body was still positioned to shield her even as agents swarmed past them, securing the scene. Victoria ran to them and pulled Emma into her arms. The little girl sobbed against her mother's chest, deep shaking sobs that came from a place beyond words. "Mommy, you came. You came." "Of course I came, baby. I will always come for you. Always." Over Emma's shoulder, Victoria's eyes met Marcus's. He stood 2 feet away, breathing hard. Knuckles split from the strike he'd delivered. Blood on his hand. That Band-Aid from Harper still in his pocket. His eyes were bright with something fierce and tender at the same time. Relief, exhaustion, and a connection that neither of them had asked for, but neither could deny. Cole supervised Whitmore's arrest personally. Hands behind his back, rights red, agents on every side. "Additional charges for kidnapping and conspiracy," Cole informed them afterward. "On top of whatever the safety investigation turns up, this man is done." Victoria nodded, but she couldn't take her eyes off Emma. She held her daughter on her lap in the back of Cole's SUV, rocking her gently, whispering reassurances she wasn't sure she believed. Emma's small hand gripped Victoria's shirt like she'd never let go. Marcus sat in the front seat, phone pressed to his ear, talking to Harper. "I'm fine, kiddo. Emma's safe. We're all coming home." A pause. "Yes, you can stay up until we get there. Yes, you can have ice cream. Just this once." He hung up and stared out the windshield. His hands were still shaking. Not from the fight. From the aftermath. The adrenaline crash. The weight of what could have happened if they'd been 2 minutes slower. If Cole's team hadn't been in position. If Whitmore had given a different order to his men. "Marcus?" Victoria's voice from the back seat. Quiet. Raw. He turned. "Thank you. For everything." 2 words. Insufficient for what they carried, but she didn't have better ones. Marcus looked at her, the former CEO of a billion-dollar company sitting in the back of an FBI vehicle. Mascara streaked, clothes wrinkled, holding her daughter like the world might try to take her again at any moment. She looked nothing like the woman who had signed his termination letter. She looked like someone who had finally figured out what mattered. "You walked into that warehouse knowing it was a trap," he said. "You didn't hesitate." "He had my daughter." "I know. That's my point." Marcus held her gaze. "When it counted, you chose people over power. That's all that matters in the end." Emma had fallen asleep against Victoria's chest. The city lights slid past the windows. Somewhere behind them, Robert Whitmore sat in handcuffs in a federal vehicle, his empire collapsing in real time. Ahead of them, Harper waited with ice cream and a Band-Aid, and the kind of trust that only children can offer unconditionally. Victoria closed her eyes and let herself breathe. Really breathe. For the first time in weeks, maybe years, the pressure in her chest eased. Not because the danger was over. She knew it wasn't. Whitmore had money, lawyers, allies on the board. The fight was far from finished. But the girls were safe. Marcus was beside her, and she had made a choice in that warehouse that she could live with for the rest of her life. She'd walk toward the fire, just like he had 2 years ago when no one else would. The weeks that followed moved fast. Whitmore was indicted on 23 counts: kidnapping, attempted murder, conspiracy, arson, 17 counts of negligent homicide for the defective medical devices. His lawyers tried every angle. Nothing stuck. The evidence was overwhelming. The witnesses were relentless. Ryan Brooks called from Austin. His voice was thick with emotion. "I saw the news. About Whitmore. About what you're building. I want to help." "Ryan, your NDA." "To hell with the NDA. I already talked to the feds, told them everything. How Whitmore ordered the safety bypass, how they blamed me, how they forced me to testify against Marcus or lose my settlement." His voice broke. "My kids deserve a father who stands up for what's right. I can find another job. Can't find another conscience." Victoria relayed the call to Marcus that evening. He stood at the kitchen sink washing dishes, his back to her, and said nothing for a long time. "He didn't owe us that," Marcus finally said. "He had every reason to stay quiet. He did it because you saved his life. Because that meant something to him. It meant something to me, too." Marcus sat down the dish and turned around. His eyes were bright. Not tears Marcus Kane didn't cry where people could see, but something close. 2 years I've wondered if I made the right call, pulling Ryan out instead of saving the prototypes, losing my job, losing everything. You saved a man's life. Yeah. And now that man is standing up on his own when nobody's making him, when it costs him something real." Marcus's voice was rough. "That's how you know it mattered." More witnesses followed Ryan. One by one, former employees who had been silenced by NDAs and threats came forward. The federal investigation expanded. Agent Melissa Carter from the Department of Labor became a regular presence, building a case that grew wider with each new testimony. Then Ethan called, Victoria's former assistant. Nervous, speaking quickly, checking over his shoulder even through the phone. "I've been helping the federal investigation," Ethan admitted, turning over documents, providing context for the emails. "But Whitmore found out." "Has he threatened you?" "My sister's car. Brakes failed yesterday. Mechanic said the line was cut. Then this morning my apartment door had a red X painted on it." The pattern was unmistakable. Anyone helping build the case against Whitmore was being targeted with escalating intimidation. Victoria knew she had to end this before someone got killed. "Ethan, is there something specific Whitmore is trying to keep buried, something beyond the safety violations?" Ethan hesitated. Then he slid a USB drive across the coffee shop table where they'd met. Engineering reports from the Texas plant, not just about the explosion, about design flaws in the medical devices they manufactured there, flaws that Whitmore knew about but didn't disclose to regulators. Victoria's hand closed around the small device. "How many people?" "At least 17 deaths that I know of, maybe more." Whitmore buried the reports, paid off the families with NDAs, recalled products under different pretexts. 17 people, 17 families, children who lost parents, spouses who lost partners, all buried under a mountain of legal agreements and corporate silence. Victoria drove straight to Marcus's apartment. He took one look at her face and sent the girls to Harper's room. "What happened?" she told him. "Everything. The defective devices, the 17 deaths, the systematic cover-up that made the safety violations look like a parking ticket by comparison." Marcus sat down slowly. His scarred hands rested flat on the kitchen table. "He let people die, knowingly, and then he paid their families to stay quiet." "Yes." "And when you started asking questions, he tried to destroy you." "Yes." And when that didn't work, he took our daughters. Yes. Marcus was silent for a long time. Then he stood, picked up his phone, and called Cole. This goes to the Department of Justice tonight, and we need to completely rethink our security. They relocated to Cole's property outside the city, a rural house with clear sight lines and limited access points. The girls treated it as an adventure, exploring the large backyard and the surrounding woods with the fearless curiosity of children who don't fully understand the danger their parents are navigating. The USB drive went to federal prosecutors. New charges were added to Whitmore's case. The possibility of a lenient plea deal evaporated. Whitmore went silent. No threats, no interference, no mysterious setbacks at the center. The absence of opposition felt more dangerous than the attacks had. He's planning something, Marcus said one evening, reviewing security footage from the center on his laptop. A man like Whitmore doesn't go quiet because he's accepted defeat. He goes quiet because he's loading a bigger gun. Then we force his hand, Victoria said. On our terms. Marcus looked at her. What are you thinking? We announce the center's grand opening, public event, media coverage, the whole works. Make it look like we're declaring victory, draw him out. Exactly. He won't be able to resist. His ego won't let him watch us succeed. And when he makes his move, we'll be ready. Marcus considered this. The tactical part of his mind was already working security positions, contingency plans, escape routes, communication protocols. It's risky. Everything we've done has been risky. This time we control the environment. They spent the next week preparing. Cole's team was briefed. Plainclothes agents would be in the crowd. Security cameras covered every angle. The girls would stay at Cole's house safely out of range. The announcement went out and the response was immediate. Media framed it as a phoenix rising from corporate corruption. Business leaders confirmed attendance. Janet Summers would represent a reformed faction of the Sterling Industries board. The story was too good. Redemption. Accountability. A former CEO turned whistleblower building something meaningful from the wreckage of her old life. The night before the opening, Victoria couldn't sleep. She sat on the porch of Cole's house, wrapped in a blanket, staring at stars she'd never noticed from her penthouse window. Marcus joined her with 2 mugs of tea. He handed her one and sat beside her. You should be resting. Big day tomorrow. My mind won't stop, running scenarios, planning for everything that could go wrong. That's normal before a mission. The key is not letting it paralyze you. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that only exists between people who have survived something together and come out the other side still standing. What happens after tomorrow? Victoria asked. Assuming everything goes according to plan, assuming Whitmore is finally contained. Marcus considered the question with the same careful attention he gave to everything. We build something that matters, something that helps people, something that reminds us why we started this. That simple. The best things usually are. He set down his mug. In the field, fear is a luxury you can't afford. When things get bad, training takes over. Instinct takes over. Tomorrow, whatever happens, we'll be ready. Victoria studied his profile against the dark sky. This man who had lost everything, his career, his income, his status, his wife, and had somehow built a life worth living from the wreckage. Not a perfect life, not an easy life, but a real one, grounded in things that couldn't be taken away by a signature on a termination letter. Marcus. Yeah. I'm glad you were in that parking garage. He looked at her in the darkness. She couldn't read his expression, but his voice when he spoke carried something she'd never heard in it before. Not warmth exactly, something deeper, something that had been growing quietly beneath the surface of their partnership for weeks. So am I. The morning of the opening arrived. The Phoenix Response Center stood ready, freshly painted, fully equipped, the hand-painted banner from the girls hanging proudly above the entrance. Victoria and Marcus arrived at dawn. By 10, the building hummed with activity. Media crews set up near the small stage. Community members filed in alongside business representatives and safety professionals. At 11, Victoria stepped up to the microphone. Marcus stood nearby, scanning the crowd with trained eyes that never stopped moving. "Welcome to the Phoenix Response Center," Victoria began. "We founded this center on a simple belief that every person deserves to return home safely at the end of their workday, that no profit margin is worth a human life, that accountability isn't just a corporate buzzword, but a moral imperative." The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. For a moment, everything felt exactly right. The culmination of months of struggle, sacrifice, and stubborn refusal to quit. Victoria finished her remarks. The applause swelled. She turned to Marcus, and something in his face made her stomach drop. He wasn't looking at the crowd anymore. He was looking at the ceiling. Then the explosion hit. The main electrical panel blew first, a deep concussive boom that shook the foundation and sent sparks cascading from above. Then a second blast ripped through the back wall, punching a hole through concrete and drywall. Smoke poured into the main hall. The crowd erupted in screaming, shoving chaos. Marcus grabbed the microphone. "Everyone move toward the exits. Calmly. Now." He pulled Victoria from the stage and pushed her toward the front door. "Main exit. Go." "What about—" "I'll check the back." "Go." Victoria ran toward the entrance, helping people through the doors, counting heads, looking for anyone trapped or injured. The sprinkler system had activated, turning the floor into a slick, treacherous mess. Outside, sirens were already wailing. Marcus moved through the smoke toward the rear of the building, guiding two disoriented journalists toward safety. A secondary explosion ripped through the storage room wall, showering him with debris. He shielded his face and kept moving. Everyone got out. Janet Summers had a cut on her arm. A few attendees had minor injuries. No fatalities. The building was damaged but standing. Victoria found Marcus outside, soot-covered and breathing hard. "That wasn't accidental," he said. "The blasts were timed, sequenced. Someone detonated them remotely." Before she could respond, Cole appeared at her side. "We've got reports of a man matching Whitmore's description leaving the area right before the explosion." Then Victoria's phone rang. Video call. Unknown number. Whitmore's face filled the screen. Behind him, the sound of a car engine. He was smiling. "Quite the opening ceremony, Victoria. Though perhaps not what you planned." Cold fury replaced Victoria's shock. "Is this what you've become, Robert? A man who bombs buildings?" "Merely a demonstration." His smile faded. "Drop your testimony. Recall the engineering reports. The center can be rebuilt. 17 people died because of those defective devices. I won't help you escape that." "A pity." Whitmore's voice went flat. "Because the next demonstration won't target a building." His eyes shifted to something off camera. "Such lovely girls, Harper and Emma, so trusting when the nice lady showed up claiming there was an emergency at school." The world stopped. Victoria couldn't breathe. Behind her, Marcus made a sound, not a word, just a sharp, involuntary intake of air like a man who's been shot. Cole was already on his radio. "Agents dispatched to the safe house." Confirmation came back in 90 seconds. The girls were gone. Mrs. Peterson, the neighbor watching them, was found unconscious, drugged. No sign of forced entry. Whitmore continued, savoring their silence. "Don't worry, they're unharmed, for now. I'll be in touch with specific instructions." The call ended. Victoria turned to Marcus. His face was a mask. Beneath it something was breaking, not falling apart, reconfiguring, the father becoming the soldier, the mechanic becoming the weapon. "We find them," he said, voice barely human. "Now." Cole's team traced the call within minutes. Ethan, broken under FBI questioning, confirmed what they already suspected. Whitmore had coerced him into revealing the safe house location by threatening his sister's life. Ethan gave them everything. A hunting cabin in the mountains 90 minutes north, owned through a shell company that Whitmore had buried under 3 layers of corporate paperwork. 3 armed men on the perimeter, Cole said, pulling up satellite imagery on his phone. 2 vehicles, cabins isolated, 1 access road in, steep terrain on 3 sides. Marcus studied the images with an intensity that made the air around him feel thin. Former military, private security, ex-law enforcement most likely. Professionals. "So am I." Cole grabbed his arm. The tactical team is 20 minutes behind us. We should wait for backup." Marcus pulled free, not roughly but with a finality that left no room for negotiation. "My daughter is in that cabin, Cole. I'm not waiting 20 minutes. I'm not waiting 5. Victoria was already moving toward Cole's SUV. Marcus turned to stop her. "You should stay here." "Don't." Her voice was quiet and absolute. "Don't ask me to stay behind while my daughter is up there. I'll drive myself if I have to." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. The CEO, who'd once sat behind a mahogany desk and signed away his career, was standing in front of him with soot on her face and blood on her sleeve, ready to climb a mountain to get her child back. He nodded once. They drove in near silence. Cole fed updates from the passenger seat. The tactical team was en route but delayed by a downed tree across the access road, possibly placed deliberately. "He's thought of everything," Victoria whispered. "Almost everything," Marcus replied. His voice had settled into something low and even, operational. The voice of a man who had done this before in places far more dangerous than the mountains of Northern California. "He doesn't know we found the cabin. He thinks you're still negotiating. That's our advantage." They pulled off onto a forestry road a half-mile from the property and continued on foot. The terrain was steep, thick with pine and undergrowth. Victoria's shoes were wrong for it. She'd been dressed for the center's opening that morning a lifetime ago, but she kept pace without complaint. Marcus moved ahead, his body low and fluid through the trees, every step deliberate. They reached the observation ridge Cole had identified from the satellite images. Below them the cabin sat in a small clearing. Wraparound porch, multiple windows, 3 guards walking the perimeter in a rotating pattern. Marcus raised the binoculars and scanned the windows one by one. Second window from the right, 2 small figures seated at a table, an adult woman standing nearby, armed. "I see them." His hands were steady on the binoculars, but his voice cracked on the last word. Just barely, just enough for Victoria to hear. She took the binoculars and found the window, found Emma sitting beside Harper, their heads close together. Harper appeared to be talking quietly, calmly, the way Marcus had taught her to behave in emergencies, keeping Emma calm, taking care of someone else even when she was the one who needed help. "They look okay," Victoria whispered. "Scared, but okay." Cole's radio crackled. "Tactical team is 10 minutes out. Hold position." Then another update. "Whitmore's black SUV spotted heading toward the cabin. Estimated arrival less than 5 minutes." Marcus lowered the binoculars. "If Whitmore gets inside, he'll use them as shields. Extraction becomes 10 times harder." "We wait for the team," Cole insisted. "The team is 10 minutes away, and Whitmore is 5 minutes out. You do the math." Victoria grabbed Marcus's arm. "I have an idea. Whitmore doesn't know we've found this place. He's expecting me to call, to negotiate, to beg. So I give him what he expects. I keep him outside talking while you go in from the back." Marcus caught on immediately. "Cole creates a diversion, draws the perimeter guards. I get our girls." Cole shook his head slowly, but he was already checking his weapon. "This is a bad plan." "It's the only plan we've got," Marcus said, "and the clock's running." Victoria moved back toward the forestry road where cell reception was stronger. Before she left, Marcus caught her hand. His grip was firm, his scarred fingers rough against hers. He didn't say be careful. He didn't say good luck. He looked at her with eyes that held everything, the fear for his daughter, the trust he'd built with this woman who had once destroyed him, the things he hadn't said because there'd never been time, because the world kept trying to tear them apart before they could figure out what they were becoming. "Get our girls back," Victoria said. She squeezed his hand once, then let go and disappeared into the trees. At the designated spot, she dialed Whitmore's number. He answered on the second ring, smug and unhurried. "Ready to make the exchange, Victoria?" "I have the files, all copies, but I need to hear their voices first." So predictable, always leading with sentiment. "Call it whatever you want, Robert. Let me speak to them or there's no deal." A pause. Movement on his end. Then Emma's voice, small, frightened. "Mommy, where are you?" I want to go home." Victoria bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted blood. "I know, baby. You'll be home soon, I promise. Is Harper with you? Are you both okay?" "Yes, the lady won't let us go outside. Mommy, I'm scared." "I know, but I need you to be brave for just a little longer. Can you do that for me?" "I think so. That's my girl. I love you so much." Whitmore took the phone back. Satisfied now about those files, Victoria launched into a deliberately complicated explanation. A storage facility across town, multiple security measures, encrypted drives, access codes that had to be entered in sequence, every detail fabricated, every sentence designed to eat time. Through the trees, she watched Whitmore's SUV arrive at the cabin. He stepped out, dark coat-polished shoes absurdly out of place on the dirt road. 2 guards approached him for a status update. His back was to the cabin. "These files document everything, Robert," Victoria said, her voice harder now. "Every decision, every death, every family you paid to keep quiet. Save the moral outrage, Victoria. You built that company on the same foundation I did." "No, I built it blind. You built it knowing exactly what it cost. And I'd do it again. Every decision I made kept that company alive, kept 12,000 people employed. You want to play saint now? Fine. But don't pretend the world runs on good intentions. It doesn't have to run on dead children either." Silence on the line. Victoria could see Whitmore standing by his car phone pressed to his ear, his free hand clenching and unclenching. Cole's voice in her earpiece. Diversion in 30 seconds. Victoria needed to keep Whitmore talking, keep him outside, keep him angry and distracted. "The families of those 17 people are going to testify, Robert. Ryan Brooks is going to testify. Every employee you blackmailed, every inspector you bribed, every report you falsified, it's all coming out. There's nothing you can do to stop it." "There's always something I can do." "Not this time. You're finished." The explosion came from the far side of the property. Cole's diversion, a controlled blast that sent the perimeter guards running toward the noise. Whitmore spun toward the sound, the phone momentarily forgotten. "What was that?" His voice sharpened. "What have you done?" Victoria dropped the pretense. "I did what you taught me, Robert. I protected what matters at any cost." She hung up and ran through the trees over rocks, her lungs burning, her ankles twisting in shoes meant for stage floors, not forest terrain. She could see Whitmore sprinting toward the cabin, shouting orders to his remaining guard. She could hear gunshots from inside 2 sharp cracks that stopped her heart mid-beat. She reached the porch, through the front door. The female guard was on the floor, unconscious. Whitmore's remaining man was slumped against the wall, disarmed, zip-tied. Marcus stood in the center of the room, breathing hard blood on his knuckles. And behind him, pressed against the far wall, clutching each other, were Emma and Harper. "Mommy." Emma broke free and ran. Victoria caught her and dropped to her knees, holding her daughter so tight that Emma squeaked. "Mommy, I knew you'd come. Harper said you'd come. She said her dad always comes and you would too." Victoria looked over Emma's shoulder. Harper was in Marcus's arms, her face buried in his neck, her small body trembling. Marcus held her the way he did everything, completely, without reservation, with everything he had. "You okay, kiddo?" His voice was rough. "I'm okay, Dad. I told Emma the rules. Stay calm. Stay together. Wait for help. That's my girl. I used the breathing thing you taught me. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. I taught Emma too." Marcus pressed his lips to the top of her head and closed his eyes. For 3 seconds, just 3, the soldier disappeared, and there was only a father holding his child. Grateful she was alive. Grateful he'd made it in time. Grateful in a way that went beyond words into something raw and fundamental. Then the front door slammed open. Whitmore stood in the doorway. No suit jacket now. Shirt untucked, gun in his right hand. His face was twisted rage, desperation, the look of a man watching everything he'd built crumble and choosing destruction over surrender. "Nobody leaves." Marcus set Harper down behind him. His body shifted feet apart, weight forward, hands open, between Whitmore and the children, between the gun and everything that mattered. "It's over, Robert," Victoria said. She stepped sideways, drawing his attention away from Marcus and the girls. "Cole's FBI team is surrounding this property right now. There is nowhere to go." "Then I've got nothing to lose." Whitmore raised the gun. It wavered between Victoria and Marcus, unable to choose a target because his rage was bigger than any single focus could contain. "Put it down," Marcus said. Quiet, the way he'd spoken to the three men in the parking garage a lifetime ago. "You're not a killer, Whitmore. You're a coward who hides behind other people. You don't have the guts to pull that trigger yourself. You don't know what I am. I know exactly what you are. You're a man who let 17 people die because it was cheaper than fixing the problem. You're a man who took 2 little girls to save his own skin. You're a man who destroyed everyone around him and called it business." Marcus took a step forward. "But you've never looked someone in the eye and pulled the trigger, and you won't start now." Whitmore's hand was shaking. The gun trembled. His eyes were wet not with tears, but with the glassy desperation of a man who'd run out of options and couldn't accept it. "You ruined me," Whitmore whispered. "Both of you. Everything I built." "You ruined yourself, Robert," Victoria said. "The day you decided a human life was worth less than a production deadline." The front door burst in behind Whitmore. Tactical team, weapons trained, commands shouted. Whitmore flinched, and Marcus closed the distance in one stride, catching the gun hand, twisting, disarming. The weapon clattered to the floor. Whitmore collapsed to his knees as agents swarmed past them. It was over in seconds. Whitmore was face down on the cabin floor, hands cuffed behind his back. Federal agents on every side. Marcus picked up Harper. Victoria pulled Emma into her arms. The 4 of them stood in the center of the small cabin while chaos moved around them. Agents' radios shouted orders, and the world narrowed to just this. 2 parents, 2 daughters, alive, together, whole. Harper reached out from Marcus's arms and touched Victoria's face with one small hand. "Are you okay?" Victoria laughed or sobbed. She wasn't sure which. "I'm okay, sweetheart. We're all okay. I told Emma," Harper said, her voice fierce and proud. "I told her our parents would come. I told her heroes don't walk away." Marcus looked at Victoria over the heads of their daughters, not their biological daughters, not by blood or law or any paperwork that existed in any office anywhere, but theirs in every way that mattered, forged through fire and fear and the stubborn refusal to abandon each other when the world demanded exactly that. Victoria held his gaze and said nothing. There was nothing left to say that their eyes weren't already saying. The weeks that followed moved fast. Whitmore was indicted on 23 counts: kidnapping, attempted murder, conspiracy, arson, 17 counts of negligent homicide for the defective medical devices. His lawyers tried every angle. Nothing stuck. The evidence was overwhelming. The witnesses were relentless. Ryan Brooks testified for 6 hours, his voice steady, his eyes clear. Former employees lined up to tell their stories. Families of the 17 victims spoke in court quietly with dignity, with a grief that no settlement could ever touch. The trial lasted 4 weeks. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. 30 years without parole. Victoria watched the verdict on television from the Phoenix Response Center, sitting in the training room with Marcus and the girls. When the word guilty came through the speakers, Emma looked up from her coloring book. "Is the bad man going to jail?" "Yes, baby. He can't hurt anyone anymore." Harper considered this with her usual seriousness. "Dad says sometimes people forget what's important until something bad happens to remind them." Marcus ruffled her hair. "Pretty wise for 8 years old." "I'm almost 9. Even wiser then." The center reopened 3 months after the bombing. No media circus this time, just a quiet gathering of the people who had built it with their hands, their savings, their belief that the world could be different if someone was willing to do the work. Frank Sullivan came. Janet Summers came. Ryan Brooks flew in from Austin with his wife and 3 kids. Cole brought beer and a speech about how Marcus still owed him for the C4 he'd used as a diversion, which he was pretty sure violated at least 4 federal regulations. Former Sterling Industries employees who had volunteered weekends for the renovation sat beside corporate executives who had enrolled in the center's first accountability training program, community members mixed with government officials. The lines between world's working class and corporate, powerful and powerless, blurred until they disappeared. Victoria stood on the small stage and looked out at these faces. 6 months ago, she had addressed shareholders in a glass-walled boardroom 40 stories above Manhattan. That woman felt like a stranger now, a ghost wearing expensive shoes. "This center exists because of you," she said. "Not just your labor or your donations, but your belief that we can create workplaces where every life is valued, where profit never takes precedence over people." Her eyes found Marcus at the back of the room. Harper sat on his shoulders for a better view. Emma stood beside them, holding Harper's ankle to steady her. The image caught in Victoria's throat. This family that had assembled itself from wreckage. Not by design, but by choice. Again and again. In parking garages and warehouses and mountain cabins and small apartments with pull-out couches and chipped coffee mugs. The center thrived. Corporate clients signed on for training programs. Community classes filled to capacity. Government agencies began recommending their accountability frameworks. Ryan Brooks relocated to join the staff full-time, leading workshops on worker safety rights. Janet Summers, now permanent CEO of a restructured Sterling MedTech, made the Phoenix Center a required training partner for all facilities. Marcus taught emergency response with the same patient precision he used teaching Harper about engines. Victoria developed corporate accountability curricula that forced executives to confront the human consequences of their decisions. Together they built something neither could have created alone. A partnership rooted not in profit or power, but in the hard-won understanding that the measure of any institution is how it treats the people at the bottom. 6 months after the reopening, on a Tuesday evening that felt ordinary in the best possible way, Marcus and Victoria sat on the apartment balcony after the girls had gone to sleep. The city spread below them. Coffee instead of tea tonight. The comfortable silence of 2 people who had stopped needing to fill every moment with words. "Do you ever miss it?" Marcus asked. "The corporate life. The power." Victoria thought about it honestly. "Sometimes I miss the certainty, the clear metrics. Revenue up, stock price up, market share up. You always knew where you stood. And now? Now I measure things differently. A factory worker who goes home safe because his employer took our training. A manager who reports a violation instead of burying it. Emma sleeping through the night without nightmares." She paused. "Those don't show up on quarterly reports." "No, but they show up where it counts." Victoria set down her coffee. "Marcus." "Yeah." "Where do you see us?" "Not the center. Us." He turned to face her. The city lights caught the edges of his scars, hands, forearms, the faint line along his jaw from the cabin, maps of every fight he'd survived, every person he'd pulled from the fire. "Us is wherever we choose to be. Together." His voice was quiet, careful, like a man handling something fragile he didn't want to break. "The center. The girls. A life built on purpose. I've learned not to plan too far ahead, just to recognize what matters and hold on with both hands." "I want that," Victoria said. "All of it. The center, the girls, you, this life we stumbled into." "So do I. Have for a while now." Their first kiss was not the kind that happens in movies. No swelling music, no perfect lighting, no dramatic declaration. It was tentative, honest, slightly awkward. 2 people in their late 30s and early 40s who had been through enough to know that the real thing doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It announces itself with trust, with showing up, with choosing each other over and over when every circumstance in the world conspires to pull you apart. 3 months later, Marcus proposed. Not in a restaurant or on a beach. In the Phoenix Response Center after the 1-year anniversary celebration. After the last guest had left and the girls had been suspiciously well-behaved during cleanup, clearly co-conspirators, he knelt in the training room where they'd taught hundreds of people to save lives and produced a ring. Simple, small stone. Nothing like what a billionaire CEO would have expected in her former life. Everything that Victoria Hayes, former Ice Queen, current partner, future wife, actually wanted. "I'm not good with formal speeches," Marcus said. His composure, the unshakable steadiness that had carried them through explosions and kidnappings and federal investigations, finally cracked. His voice shook. His eyes were bright. "But I know what matters. You, the girls, this life we've built. I want to make it official, if you do too." Harper and Emma stood 3 feet away, vibrating with barely contained excitement. "Is that a yes?" Marcus asked when Victoria's silence stretched longer than he expected. She laughed through tears she'd given up trying to control. "Yes, of course yes." The girls launched themselves forward. The 4 of them stood in a tangle of arms and laughter and tears in the center they had built from crisis and conviction. And the future stretched ahead of them like a road that finally, after all the wrong turns and dead ends and burning bridges, pointed somewhere worth going. The wedding was small. The Phoenix Center courtyard transformed with lights and flowers. Cole stood as best man. Janet Summers sat in the front row. Frank Sullivan cried openly and without apology. Ryan Brooks gave a toast that lasted 12 minutes and left no dry eye in the house. Harper and Emma served as flower girls, solemn with responsibility until they reached the end of the aisle and broke into identical grins. They wore matching dresses and matching first aid kits clipped to their belts. Harper's idea, non-negotiable. After the ceremony, while the reception hummed with conversation and laughter, the girls pulled Victoria away to the memorial garden behind the building. The quiet space dedicated to those who had lost their lives due to safety violations. The 17 victims and others whose stories had emerged through the center's work. They presented her with a small orange paper crane carefully folded hanging from one of the garden's fixtures. "We made it for good luck," Harper explained, "like the one I gave you before." "We wrote something inside," Emma added. Victoria unfolded the fragile paper. Inside, in Harper's careful handwriting, surrounded by Emma's hand-drawn stars, were 7 words. "Heroes are just people who don't walk away." Victoria held the paper crane in both hands and felt the full weight of the past year settle into something she could carry. Not light, never light, but bearable because she wasn't carrying it alone. Marcus appeared in the garden entrance. He took in the scene, his wife, their daughters, the paper crane, the memorial garden where names of the dead reminded them every day why the work mattered. "Found the super important wedding thing, I see." The girls nodded solemnly. "Mission accomplished." Victoria looked at him, this man in a rented suit with scarred hands and a Band-Aid in his pocket that his 8-year-old daughter had given him for luck. This mechanic, this soldier, this father, this husband. The man the world had looked down on, dismissed, discarded. And the man who, when it mattered most, had been the only one willing to stand up. He extended his hand. "Dance with me, Mrs. Kane." She took it. Always. They danced in the courtyard, under string lights, while their daughters conspired over dessert plates and their unlikely family celebrated around them. And later that night, standing together on the center's roof, the paper crane on the ledge beside them and the city spread below like a promise. Marcus said something Victoria would remember for the rest of her life. "This is just the beginning. The real work is still ahead." Victoria leaned into him and felt the truth of it. Not as a burden, but as a gift. The chance to wake up every morning and do something that mattered with someone who mattered, for people who deserved to come home safe at the end of every shift, every day, every life. "Then it's a good thing we're not doing it alone," she said. Below them, the Phoenix Response Center stood solid and lit against the dark. Rebuilt from bombing and betrayal. Staffed by people who had chosen courage over convenience. Named for the thing that rises from ashes and refuses to stay dead. Above them, stars, Between them, everything they'd almost lost and everything they'd gained. Not because the world was kind, but because two people decided again and again in parking garages and courtrooms and burning buildings and mountain cabins that walking away was not an option. Marcus Kane had been fired for saving a life. He'd lost his career, his income, his standing in the world. He'd been called insubordinate, reckless, a liability. He'd fixed cars in a garage for 2 years while the man who ruined him climbed higher, and the woman who signed his termination never lost a night's sleep. But he'd kept going, kept teaching his daughter that helping people wasn't about being a hero. It was about not leaving anyone behind. Kept believing that doing the right thing was its own reward, even when the reward looked like a 2-bedroom apartment and a chipped coffee mug. And when the scream came, "Help my mom, they beat my mom," he didn't hesitate, didn't calculate, didn't ask whether the woman on the ground deserved his help or whether the world would punish him again for giving it. He just moved toward the danger, toward the need, toward the fire, because that's what heroes do, not the ones in movies or comic books, the real ones, the ones in oil-stained coveralls with burned hands and 8-year-old daughters who carry first aid kits to school. They don't walk away.